In the 3rd year after our marriage, Lucas kept a young, delicate female college student, and I sponsored a poor young man who looked 70% like him. The young man's name was Luis. Even his name resembled Lucas's. He was beautiful and pure, always blushing as he called me sis. One time, when I was drunk, I mistook him for someone else. The young man, covered in red marks, looked at me with grievance in his eyes, his voice trembling. Sis, I don't mind if you treat me as him. I only beg to stay by your side. I could not withstand the young man's burning, persistent entanglement, and helplessly agreed. That night, Lucas, who had long since moved out, returned home for the first time in ages. He punched Luis in the face, veins bulging. She's only treating you as my substitute. Luis raised his hand and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, then smiled lazily. Bro, it was sis who wanted me. From now on, between the two of us, it's really hard to say who's the substitute. Chapter 1. The company's new product launch. Lucas sat beside me, his face dark as he repeatedly checked his phone. It seemed that the message he wanted never arrived, so he slammed the screen face down onto the table. There was no need to guess. The little canary he kept was throwing a tantrum again. My chest felt unbearably blocked. I exhaled deeply and turned my head to look at him. There are reporters taking photos. Be mindful. The marriage existed in name only, but we still had to keep up appearances. After all, we had once gone viral as a loving couple, and that image was most beneficial for maximizing profits. Lucas answered perfunctorily and held my hand. I know. The moment his words fell, a frail figure flashed past outside the door. Valentina's gaze landed on our overlapping hands and lingered there for a few seconds. As if deeply wounded, she staggered 2 steps, tears quickly gathering in her eyes. Stubborn, yet pitiful. Lucas's palm tightened unconsciously, squeezing my hand until it hurt. It hurts. I sucked in a breath of cold air and frowned. Valentina, outside the door, turned and ran away. Lucas got up and quickly chased after her, not sparing me a single glance. I watched his figure leave without looking back. And for a moment, I suddenly felt dazed. When we had just gotten married, Lucas was even afraid I would burn my hands while holding a cup of hot water. So how had we become like this? The assistant looked embarrassed and reminded me quietly beside my ear. Emma, Lucas is supposed to go on stage and speak in half an hour. I lowered my eyes and looked at the red mark around my wrist, curling my lips self-mockingly. Do you think he'll answer if I call him now? Chapter 2. 20 minutes passed, and Lucas still had not returned. I glanced at the time on the large screen. Where is he? Still haven't found him? His secretary looked utterly miserable, hesitating to speak. Lucas is with Valentina. We don't dare disturb them. I understood at once and smiled numbly. I'll go find him. When I pushed open the door to the stairwell, Lucas was pressing Valentina against the wall and forcefully kissing her. His eyes were filled with desire, and his voice carried a thin layer of anger. How long are you going to keep sulking with me? Are you really willing to let me go home? Valentina's eyes reddened, and she emotionally raised her hand to push him away. Then go find that old woman. It was very clearly said in anger, the opposite of what she meant. Lucas seemed to enjoy her reaction very much and gave a low laugh. Then he grabbed her wrist and pinned it above her head, deepening the kiss. Still acting tough? Valentina clutched Lucas's collar tightly and no longer resisted. Soon, with a flushed face, she softened in his arms, her wet eyes especially seductive. I slowly blinked. Even after going through this so many times, my heart still inevitably ached dully, because I had gripped it too hard. The edges of the phone case in my hand dug into my palm. Belatedly, I loosened my grip, yet I could not feel the pain. Lucas, now is not the time for you to flirt. Everyone is waiting for you. I took a deep breath and said calmly. In truth, I had already tried hard to control myself, but the tremor in my voice was still especially obvious in the empty stairwell. Valentina was like a startled rabbit, whimpering as she burrowed into Lucas's arms. Lucas held her even tighter, his tone cold. Emma, from now on, just leave this kind of thing to the secretary. You know Valentina doesn't want to see you. 3 years into our marriage, my husband called me by my full name. Yet in front of me, He affectionately called another woman by a cutesy nickname. How ridiculous. Do you think I'm here to catch you cheating? My throat tightened, and I suddenly laughed out loud. If it had been before, by this moment, I would already have been screaming, making a scene, hysterically tearing at Valentina's face. But now, I suddenly felt a deep, overwhelming exhaustion. I did not even have the desire to explain. I clearly understood that Valentina was not the first, and she would not be the last. Lucas was still holding Valentina's hand, their fingers interlocked. Sensing my gaze, Valentina subconsciously tried to let go, but Lucas held her hand even tighter instead. She opened her mouth in a panic, looking as if she were about to cry from anxiety. This cautious, pitiful appearance was truly worlds apart from the way she had just arrogantly called me an old woman. Emma, listen to me explain. When I got together with Lucas, I didn't know he was married. I never wanted to ruin your marriage. But later, Lucas kept refusing to agree to break up with me. Valentina's tone was innocent and aggrieved. As if she were the victim, Lucas turned his eyes toward her and curled his lips in a half-smile. What's this? Weren't you the one who was jealous just now? Valentina immediately stopped speaking and glared at him with a flushed face. Lucas smiled and raised his hand to pinch her cheek. When he looked at me again, there was no emotion in his eyes. Emma, haven't you caused enough scenes already? Yes, I had caused enough scenes. When I first found out Lucas had cheated, I rushed straight into the company and smashed up his office. After that, there was following him, throwing tantrums, cutting my wrists. I used every extreme method possible. I forced myself into becoming an emotionally out-of-control lunatic. A huge joke. But what about Lucas? He did not even come back to look at me once. He directly contacted a moving company to move his things to another house and started living with Valentina. Actually, I should have seen it clearly long ago. I gave an extremely faint laugh and spoke without warning. Lucas, let's get divorced. The glass window reflected my beautiful face. It was a refined dignity built up by money. My smooth skin showing not a single wrinkle. No one could tell that I was already close to 30. But those eyes were like pearls without luster, utterly lacking spirit. I should not continue like this anymore. Lucas froze for a moment, then laughed carelessly. Divorce again? Can you come up with something new next time? Then, without waiting for me to speak, he took Valentina's hand and strode away. That teasing and lazy attitude was as if he was certain I was merely bluffing. Watching their figures leave while leaning against each other, my heart felt an unprecedented calm. I had once thought that I would never possibly divorce in this lifetime. Even if my head was broken and bleeding, I would entangle myself with Lucas until the very end. We would torture each other in grand, earth-shaking ways, cursing each other. But when disappointment truly descended, it was actually this silent and soundless, like a night breeze casually brushing past, and the candle flame on the table suddenly going out. Then everything was swallowed by darkness, quiet and sudden. Chapter 3. I did not keep pestering him. On the way back, I called my lawyer. Because the amount of marital property was enormous, dividing it would not be easy, since I could no longer keep the person. Then when it came to money and assets, I absolutely had to gain the upper hand. I discussed things with the lawyer in the study until midnight before we finally drafted a preliminary plan. Just as I hung up the phone, Luis's strong arms wrapped around my waist. He was the impoverished student I had sponsored. At that time, I had gone to the school to make a donation, and I just so happened to run into him filling out financial aid forms. That face and name, both extremely similar to Lucas's, made me notice him almost at first glance. It was also precisely because of this that, again and again, I lowered my boundaries and indulged his approach. Luis was beautiful and pure, and his feelings for me were obvious. After I realized this, I originally wanted to keep my distance. Who would have thought that one time, when I was drunk, I mistook him for someone else? The next day, the young man, covered in red marks, looked at me with grievance in his eyes, his voice trembling. Who is Lucas? You called his name last night. Sis, I don't mind if you treat me as him. I only beg to stay by your side. A broken, puppy-like boy like that, who could possibly resist? Unable to withstand the young man's burning, persistent entanglement, I gradually began to fall for him. Luis rested his chin in the hollow of my neck, tilted his head, and kissed my lips. Sis, I missed you so much. I laughed despite myself and turned around to hug him back. If I remember correctly, we kissed when we got home. That was ages ago. He gave a dissatisfied little hum and bit my lip, like a clingy golden retriever begging for affection. I rubbed his head, and my heart, which had been like a stagnant pool of dead water, became light again. I was preparing for the divorce. I might be very busy these next few days, so you'll just have to put up with it a little. Luis took a few seconds to react, then suddenly lifted me up and pushed me down onto the desk. He pressed down against me perfectly, his gaze burning. Sis, you're finally going to belong to me. Scalding kisses bloomed one after another across my body. Luis smiled in satisfaction, moving against me tirelessly. I wrapped my arms around his neck and nearly got pushed off the desk several times. Luis held my knees and pressed them apart, sinking even deeper. Only when the sky outside the window began to brighten did he finally let me go. Thoroughly satisfied, I went limp in his arms, breathing rapidly. My phone rang several times, but I had no strength to answer it. Luis tenderly kissed my forehead and carried me into the bathroom. Under the bright light, the young man had broad shoulders, a narrow waist, and smooth, defined abdominal lines. The splashed water droplets rolled all the way down along his V-line, making the faintly bulging veins on his lower abdomen look even sexier. The scent of youthful hormones rushed toward me, the best aphrodisiac. My face heated from looking, and I pushed at his chest. You go out. I'll wash by myself. Luis laughed softly and obediently said yes. Chapter 4. I had not expected Lucas, who had not come home for an entire year, to suddenly return. When I heard the commotion and went out wrapped in a bath towel, the two of them were already fighting. Lucas! What the hell are you doing? Lucas's eyes were filled with gloom, and even his voice carried a violent hostility. You didn't answer my call because you were fooling around with him? Watch your mouth. Lucas's expression stiffened for a moment. He seemed unaccustomed to such a forceful attitude from me. You want a divorce because of him? Luis suddenly laughed. He slowly tugged open his collar, revealing the ambiguous marks on his body, and mocked lightly. Isn't that obvious? Why insist on humiliating yourself? Lucas seemed to laugh from anger. He slowly lifted his eyes and looked at me. Emma, do you really think he's some good person? Do you know that he is my father's illegitimate son? My dear little brother. Guess why he approached you? My face turned completely cold. Lucas, get out. What happens between me and him is not something you get to meddle in. On the very first day we met, Luis had already confessed his background to me clearly and thoroughly. It matched the information my assistant had gathered for me exactly. Lucas's expression went briefly blank. I actually saw something close to wounded disbelief in his eyes. He opened his mouth, his voice somewhat strained. You don't believe me? Luis wrapped an arm around my waist, the smile at the corner of his lips deepening. Didn't you hear her? Sis told you to get out. Lucas seemed to be completely enraged. He punched Luis in the face, veins bulging on the back of his hand. What are you so proud of? Just because of that face of yours? Then you should understand even better that she's only treating you as my substitute. Luis did not dodge. The punch knocked his head to the side. After a long while, he raised his hand and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, then smiled lazily. Bro, the one who can't see clearly is you. It was Sis who wanted me. From now on, between the two of us, it's really hard to say who's the substitute. Lucas's face gradually turned ugly. He stared fixedly at me. Emma, are you serious? I directly raised my hand and slapped him. Who gave you permission to hit him? Luis. Call the police. Tell them someone trespassed into a private residence and intentionally harmed someone. Chapter 5. This house was under my personal name, and there was clear evidence proving that Lucas and I had an abnormal marital relationship and had already been separated for a year. At the police station, lawyers from both sides argued forcefully based on reason. I threw out Luis's injury assessment report, my face showing no expression. We do not accept reconciliation. Luis obediently followed behind me, raising his hand to gently stroke my back and help me calm down. Sis, I'm fine, as long as it doesn't make things difficult for you. It doesn't matter even if I let him beat me up again. Don't get angry because of me. Anger hurts your body. Lucas, who had not said a word the entire time, suddenly stood up and grabbed Luis by the collar. You damn pretentious coquette. Try acting one more time. The lawyer was so frightened that he rushed forward in one stride, wanting to stop him but not daring to. Lucas, calm down. If you start a fight in the police station, then there really will be no explaining this. I stood in front of Luis and pushed Lucas away with force. Lucas! Try touching him again. The moment Luis broke free from his restraint, he immediately turned around and hugged me. He held my waist tightly and said pitifully, Sis, can we go home? I want you to hold me. Luis kept coughing as if gravely injured, like a stray animal with no sense of security. Throughout the entire process, he did not say a single word directly to Lucas, yet he successfully provoked Lucas until he was wounded all over. Lucas staggered one step and stared at me fiercely. A shadowy gloom gathered in his eyes. He clenched that assessment report and flung it onto the ground, as if he had reached the peak of anger. Lucas gritted his back teeth so hard that both sides of his cheeks trembled slightly. Emma, he's clearly acting. It's so fake, can't you tell? I met his eyes surging with anger and found it utterly ridiculous. I like him exactly like this. It's very cute, isn't it? This golden line of wisdom had originally been told to me by Lucas himself. Back then, Valentina had staged everything herself and falsely accused me of pushing her into the swimming pool. Lucas held Valentina, who was soaked from head to toe, and convicted me without even being willing to check the surveillance footage. At that time, I had been trembling all over with anger just like he was now. Questioning him, could he really not see through such poor acting? Lucas had smiled lightly, as if nothing mattered, and mocked me. Of course I know she's acting. So what? She's very cute like this, isn't she? That familiar line seemed to trigger some invisible switch. Lucas was silent for a few seconds, then raised his hand to put on his glasses and gradually regained his calm. He slowly and methodically buttoned his suit, then raised his eyes to look at me. His gaze was deep and heavy, as if he wanted to see through me. Emma, I know you still blame me, whether it's being detained or tolerating his existence. I'll accept all of it, but divorce is absolutely impossible. I looked at him, this man I had once cared about with all my heart. At this moment, he seemed to be nothing more than this. I calmly nodded and laughed softly. Then we'll go through the litigation process for divorce. Chapter 6. I did not know what madness had gotten into Lucas. He refused the lawyer's reconciliation proposal and truly, obediently stayed detained at the police station for a week. For the sake of the company's reputation, this matter was kept extremely tightly under wraps. But what surprised me was that even Valentina did not know. In the car, I handed him a brand new suit. Clean yourself up. Let's go back to the old family residence. Grandma hasn't been able to contact you these past few days and is very worried. She called me. I was afraid the truth would be exposed, so I promised her we would go back and stay tonight. Grandma was in poor health and loved to overthink. Her heart condition could not withstand even the slightest risk. So I only lied to her and said Lucas had gone overseas to inspect a branch company. As for the separation and divorce, in front of Grandma, we had both tacitly never mentioned it. So the old woman still thought we loved each other the same way as before. Lucas rubbed his brow and looked at me with a gaze that was unexpectedly somewhat gentle. Okay, I'll listen to you. I froze for a moment. Are you sure you don't want to go see Valentina first? She's been looking for you like crazy these past few days. Valentina was the one who had stayed by Lucas's side the longest. She was also the one Lucas indulged the most. Lucas glanced at the missed calls on the screen and pressed the button to turn it off. No need. I signaled the driver to start the car and did not continue the conversation. Perhaps they had quarreled again, but none of that had anything to do with me. At the dinner table, Grandma smiled and put food into my bowl. Why has our Emma gotten thinner again? After saying that, she glared sideways at Lucas. How are you taking care of Emma? All day long. You only know how to run around outside. How can work be more important than your wife? You've been married for so long. It's time to have a child. Grandma, we're not in a hurry. I wanted to brush the topic aside, but Lucas, unusually, did not refute it. He held my hand and said seriously, I understand, Grandma. My smile stiffened slightly, and under the table, I tried to pull free. Let go. Lucas's long fingers stubbornly squeezed into the gaps between mine, finally interlocking our fingers. He picked up the soup bowl I had drunk from and slowly took a sip, then said in a low voice, "Careful, Grandma might see." I directly stepped on his foot, taking advantage of the moment when he loosened his grip from pain. I withdrew my hand and stood up. "Grandma, I'm full. I'll go walk around in the courtyard." Grandma waved her hand and muttered, "Emma, while you're at it, go take a look at that tree in the back. It was perfectly fine, but it hasn't been bearing fruit. And these past few days its leaves have been falling too. This is the first time in all these years. This old woman hasn't been able to figure out what's wrong with it either." I looked out the window. That peach tree? All right, I'll go take a look. A servant handed me a shovel. I crouched in front of the tree and dug up the soil. The roots were exposed to the air, and I saw an ugly hole in them. It's all been eaten hollow by insects. Find a time to dig it out, then find someone to treat the area so it doesn't infect the other plants. I quietly looked at the ruined leaves scattered all over the ground, my heart terribly hollow. Slowly standing up, I put the tool back. I'll contact an expert tomorrow to treat it. It's not allowed to be dug out. At some point, Lucas had followed me over and gave instructions to the servant. I lifted my chin slightly. The roots are completely rotten. How could it possibly be treated? There was a stubbornness in Lucas's eyes that I could not understand. "Don't you remember? The first time we met was under this tree. You were the one who said it had a different meaning." I calmly looked at him and smiled. "It's precisely because I remember that I think digging it out is more appropriate." When I was 10 years old, I followed my parents to Lucas's home as guests. I had an older brother. He was placed under great expectations and raised as the heir, while I was merely a tool for marriage alliance. So my parents eagerly introduced my brother to Lucas, hoping he could connect with Lucas's family line, and I was left behind, standing in the courtyard, watching the fatherly and motherly love that did not belong to me. But in the end, Lucas chose me as his playmate. I had never been the kind of person who did not fight or compete and simply accepted everything, since they did not think highly of me. Then I was determined to prove them wrong, so I had learned Lucas's preferences in advance. I practiced basketball hard at home. Then in the backyard, I pretended to casually make a three-pointer. I looked quiet and fragile. Yet when I played basketball, I was accurate and ruthless. That kind of contrast immediately aroused Lucas's interest. He told me, "I like you not only because you can play basketball, it's because I saw ambition in your eyes. I've never seen a girl as impressive as you." And so, we became intimate partners, and also rivals who were hardest to part from. After my father passed away, he overcame all opposition and supported me in seizing power. The day I successfully took the position of president, Lucas rented out all the large screens in the city to celebrate for me. He said, "Emma, marry me. I'll only be good to you for the rest of my life." Some people said I was too strong, too independent, and not a qualified wife by worldly standards. But Lucas only sneered. "Our Emma is different from those women who only know how to act cute. Love between equals is what really feels exciting." But later, he was also the one who said, "Emma, stop fighting so hard every day like a man. All you know is work, and you don't know how to coax people. Looking at you feels no different from looking at a colleague. How am I supposed to feel anything?" See? A lifetime can actually be very short. So short that only 3 years remain. When love no longer exists, even the reasons you once fell in love can turn into blades for condemnation. They stab into the heart and stir it until flesh and blood are mangled. I had collapsed. I had doubted myself. But I was still me, and I had still decided to become myself again. Lucas took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling. "Emma, let's stop making trouble. I admit I went too far during this period. From now on, I won't let Valentina disturb your mood again. Let's not get divorced. All right?" From beginning to end, I never thought about separating from you. The wound was too deep. Even after healing, it would still ache faintly. My eyes felt somewhat sore, and even my breathing became rapid. "There's no need, Lucas. You're just like this tree, rotten all the way through. So I don't want you anymore." Chapter 7. At night was just preparing to rest. Lucas, who should have been in the study, suddenly pushed the door open and came in. He reeked of alcohol, stumbling as he threw himself toward me. I tilted my body and dodged. "Lucas, have you been drinking?" He refused to let it go, gripping my wrist and refusing to release me. "Wife, don't go." I frowned and forcefully pried his fingers open one by one. "What madness are you acting out? We're already getting divorced." Hearing the word divorce, Lucas's eyes reddened all at once. He stared fixedly at me, his voice trembling. "We're not divorcing. We're not getting divorced." There was pleading mixed into his tone, for no reason at all. I actually sensed a hint of humbleness in it. The thought startled even me. So he could regret things too? In the past, whenever my emotions spiraled out of control, I had imagined countless times that he would admit he was wrong and tell me that he could not live without me. But at this moment, I only found it laughable. "Lucas, stop being pathetic." I casually dropped that sentence and lifted my foot to leave. When I stood up, Lucas grabbed the hem of my nightgown. In the struggle, the neckline slipped down from my shoulder, revealing the ambiguous marks beneath my collarbone. I immediately covered my chest, finally unable to endure it anymore. "Lucas, get out." Lucas's eyes gradually darkened, as if some forbidden scale had been touched. He completely ignored my resistance, roughly pressing me down onto the bed and blocking my lips with a biting kiss. "We're the married couple. We're the ones who should be sleeping together. Are you still thinking about that illegitimate son? I know it. You can't bear to let me go. He's nothing but a substitute. Now I'm back. Emma, I'm back. You're not allowed to go find him anymore." Lucas's fingertips ground forcefully over my skin, trying to erase the kiss marks Luis had left behind. He held my waist down and was about to lift my nightgown. Shame and fury surged together. I struggled desperately and slapped him across the face. "Get out! Get out!" Physiological tears spilled from the corners of my eyes, and my entire body fell backward as if all strength had left me. My emotions were too intense, so much so that when I spoke, my lips trembled uncontrollably. That slap used every bit of strength I had. Lucas finally went still and silently looked at me. I closed my eyes for a moment and repeated, "Lucas, get out." After a long time, he slammed the door and left. Chapter 8. I was clearly exhausted to the extreme. Yet no matter what, I could not fall asleep. Bitterness spread like ripples in circle after circle. My heart ached dully. I curled up under the quilt and stared blankly at the ceiling. Once, we truly had loved each other very much, hadn't we? Otherwise, why would pulling away hurt so much? Faint rustling sounds came from outside the door, followed closely by the sound of a metal doorknob being pressed down. Like a startled bird, I shrank backward. "Who is it?" "Sis, it's me." I relaxed and turned on a small lamp. "How did you get in?" I wore a mask. It was dark at night too, so the nanny thought I was Lucas and didn't stop me at all. Our eyes met, and Luis froze for a moment. His smug tone came to an abrupt stop. The proud, praise-seeking expression on his face was instantly replaced by anger. "He bullied you, didn't he?" Luis's face turned cold, his voice suppressing a violent hostility. He gently brushed over the reddened corner of my eye, then lifted his gaze to look at me. Those sharp phoenix eyes with visible lower whites were now as keen as blades. His knuckles tightened, pale blue veins rising beneath the skin. This was the first time I had seen Luis reveal such a forceful, oppressive side. My heartbeat quickened by a few beats. I raised my hand, held his wrist bone, and shook it lightly. "Luis, you're so fierce." Clearly, I was 5 years older than Luis, but in front of him, I would always unconsciously let a coquettish tone slip out. Luis's tone instantly softened, and he turned his hand over to hold mine. "I was just too worried about you." "Sis, don't worry. I didn't suffer any loss. I beat him and made him run away." I smiled at him and patted the quilt beside me. Luis slipped under the covers and pulled me into his arms. His voice muffled. "Sis, hurry up and divorce him. From now on, I'll protect you." He raised his eyes and looked at me. In his eyes, there was only my clear reflection. Once, Lucas had also been like this, with his whole heart and eyes filled only with me. My heart throbbed for an instant, and I changed the subject. "Why did you come find me in the middle of the night?" I would not lose the courage to love again just because of the failure of a marriage. The person who was wrong was not me. I had no need to punish myself for someone else's mistakes. I still looked forward to love. It was just that when I touched happiness, I became more cautious. As if punishing me, Luis bit down on my collarbone. Sis, are you afraid? Afraid that I'll change my heart too. I looked at him, not knowing how to speak for a moment. Over these years, I had learned to disguise myself, learned to numb myself, and grown used to arguing. Only, I had forgotten that people who loved each other could actually communicate properly. The young man's words were as direct as his love. Luis said seriously, I saw that you read the historical messages in the work group, but you didn't reply to them. That means you weren't just staying up late normally. You couldn't sleep because you were unhappy. My heart trembled. As if fine, dense bubbles were rising after a bottle of orange soda had been opened. He held me even tighter, his heartbeat striking again and again. You couldn't sleep, but you didn't contact me. Instead, you were so bored that you went to read work messages. So I guess that you actually needed me very much. Sis, I'm different from Lucas. He plucked down the moon, then complained that the moon was too cold. But I only want to watch the moon hang high forever and be her most devout believer. My nose felt a little sour, and I refuted him in a small voice. What kind of twisted logic is that? It has no logic at all. How could not contacting you mean I needed you very much? Luis sat up straight with an entirely serious expression, lifting his chin slightly with great pride. See? This is what you don't understand. A girlfriend's thoughts must be carefully guessed. Especially my girlfriend. I know she loves saying the opposite of what she means. My cheeks felt slightly hot, and I instinctively denied it. I'm not your girlfriend. Luis did not answer. He only looked at me teasingly. Only then did I realize that I had fallen right into his trap. Embarrassed and annoyed, I reached out to hit him. Luis took the opportunity to press me beneath him and chuckled softly. Sis, why are you so cute? I wrapped my arms around his neck and looked into his eyes. My heartbeat grew faster and faster. 3 seconds later, as if possessed, I took the initiative and kissed him. Luis paused, then immediately turned the tables. Again and again. He filled me completely, his scorching body temperature nearly melting me. Amid the rise and fall, I heard Luis's sensual panting. He said, Emma, I've finally touched my moon. Many years ago, Luis's mother passed away. His father regarded him as a stain on his life and refused to acknowledge him. Everyone pointed fingers at him. His classmates called him a bastard born of a mistress, crushing the young man's fragile self-esteem bit by bit. Even the teachers sat by and did nothing. For the first time, he learned that rumors could kill. They were even deadlier than bullets. Luis suffered blow after blow, and his mental state soon developed problems. Severe depression, but no money to buy medicine. He wanted to ask his father for justice, but was beaten by the bodyguards and driven out, looking as miserable as a drenched stray dog. When he collapsed by the roadside, he slowly climbed onto the railing. Below was a rushing river. Emma appeared at exactly that moment. With one hand, she neatly pinched the back of his neck and pressed him downward. Instinctively, Luis gripped the railing tightly and retreated toward the roadside. Only after the distance opened did he realize that Emma's other hand had accurately grabbed the waistband of his pants. Her strength was great, so great that he could only move half a step. Luis felt the humiliation of having been toyed with the entire time and questioned her as if venting. What are you doing? Emma quietly looked at him and let go. Weren't you going to kill yourself? I was helping you, crazy woman. Emma did not get angry and continued. What kind of ability is seeking death? Making the people who tried to force you to die pay the price, that's ability. Besides, you're actually afraid, aren't you? So if you're afraid of death, then live properly. Emma called the police and only left after confirming that Luis was being taken care of by the police. That day, the sunset burned through half the sky, scarlet and magnificent. Luis sat in the police car and saw Emma happily run over to a boy. The boy held a basketball in one hand and took her hand with the other. Their shadows flowed along with the light. For the first time, Luis felt that perhaps this world was not that terrible after all. In his numb and dim life, he tasted an emotion called jealousy. And so, Luis worked desperately hard, finally standing before Emma once again. but he discovered that the girl who had once brimmed with vitality had become an everlasting flower that had lost its life force. Her exterior was bright and beautiful, never decaying, yet inside, she was hollow and unsupported. At that moment, a nearly twisted possessiveness surged in Luis's heart. He wanted his moon to remain forever bright and clear, hanging high above. Chapter 9. College boys really did have good stamina. That night, Luis tossed me around over and over until dawn. When I woke up the next day, it was already afternoon, and my legs were terribly sore. I went downstairs to eat, only to run straight into Lucas, who had just returned. The nanny stood frozen in place, holding a bowl of bird's nest soup, and hesitated before saying, "Sir, didn't you just go out? And it seems like you weren't wearing this outfit." In just a few short seconds, Lucas seemed to understand something. His gaze landed on the hand I was using to rub my waist. Dark as the sea before a storm, unexpectedly, he slowly spoke. "You remembered wrong." I let out a breath of relief and changed the subject. After all, if we started arguing now, Grandma would definitely become suspicious. Grandma had always loved me like her own granddaughter, and I did not want to worry her. "I remember we have a joint schedule this afternoon, right? Why didn't you wake me earlier?" The company had sponsored a batch of Hope schools in remote mountain areas as part of its public welfare promotion. This year, 3 students from the school had been admitted to Project 211 universities. The media rushed to report on it, and the popularity remained high. So Lucas and I decided to personally go visit those 3 students and provide follow-up sponsorship, while also taking the opportunity to market the brand image. Divorce was divorce, but when it came to making money, I was serious. I glanced at the clock and sped up my eating. Lucas's gaze was deep. "I didn't want to disturb your rest. You don't sleep well, so it's rare for you to sleep in." His tone was calm, even carrying a hint of trying to please me, as if last night's intense argument had never happened. I fell silent for a moment and suddenly lost my appetite. "Let's go. Don't be late." Lucas quickly followed and very naturally reached out to take my bag. Almost instinctively, I avoided him. The air went quiet for a moment. Lucas's eyelashes trembled slightly. He withdrew his hand, which had stiffened in midair. I remember that in the past, whenever we went out, I was the one who carried your bag. I had no mood to reminisce with him and walked forward on my own. "Thank you, I won't need that anymore." Inside the car, the atmosphere was strangely stiff. "This mountain road is especially rugged. It'll probably be very bumpy. Your waist isn't good, so use a cushion." "No need. There are still more than 2 hours. Do you want to lean on me and sleep for a while?" "No need. Are you carsick again?" "I prepared medicine." "Lucas, what exactly are you trying to say?" I sighed and said irritably. Lucas pursed his lips and pulled out a smile. "Emma, can we not get divorced? Last night, I was impulsive. I apologize to you." He paused for a moment, then continued. "If you don't want to cut things off with him, that's fine too. I won't force you anymore as long as you don't divorce me. Every condition can be discussed." I gave a faint smile and turned my head to look out the window. "Lucas, who are you putting on this act for now? I only find it disgusting. When we go back, let's complete the divorce procedures." Lucas's voice was unsteady. "Impossible. I won't agree to divorce." The deep affection I had once dreamed of now arrived. Yet I only found it noisy. I did not even have the patience to restate my chances of winning a litigation divorce. So I closed my eyes and pretended to rest. No longer speaking. Chapter 10. On the return trip, we encountered a rainstorm. A landslide caused mud and sand to bury the road surface. The wheels sank into the mud and could not move. Lucas stared at the pouring rain outside the window and comforted me in a low voice. "Emma, don't worry. I've already contacted my assistant to come pick us up. He'll be here soon." I looked at the phone in my hand, which had no signal, and gave a perfunctory response. If he could not receive any messages, Luis would probably get jealous again later. Sigh. I would have to coax him again when I got back. What a sweet burden. The image of Luis's intensely aggressive movements surfaced in my mind, and I could not help curling the corners of my lips. Knock, knock, knock. A burst of urgent knocking pulled my thoughts back. I looked toward the sound and saw Valentina standing in the rain. soaked from head to toe, frantically pulling at the car door handle. "Lucas! Open the door!" Lucas's first reaction was actually to turn back and look at me, a trace of panic flashing through his eyes. But his movement to open the car door was not delayed in the slightest. Lucas looked at her, his voice icy. "Who told you to come?" Valentina was like a fledgling returning to its nest as she threw herself into Lucas's arms. She lifted her drenched little face and cried pitifully. "I couldn't find you anywhere these past few days. When I saw on the live TV broadcast that you were here, I immediately rushed over. Who knew there would be a rainstorm halfway? The driver refused to drive any farther, so I could only walk along the highway on my own 2 feet. Lucas, I missed you so much. Please don't abandon me, okay? I'm really so scared." Lucas held her, and heartache gradually appeared in his eyes. "How dare you? In this kind of weather, weren't you afraid something would happen?" Rather than blame, it sounded more like concern. Valentina cried even harder. I was scared to death. But I was even more afraid that you didn't want me anymore." The water on the road was still rising. In just a short while, it had already covered our calves. The car probably could not make it here. I had no interest in listening to the two of them pour their hearts out to each other. Uneasily, I focused on the situation in the curtain of rain. "It looks like a rescue boat is coming," the driver spoke up to remind us. Lucas finally realized his own loss of composure, his expression ugly. "Valentina, stay in the car for now. I'll send Emma to a safe place first and come back for you. She's afraid of water and can't swim, so she has to go first. As for what's between us, we'll talk after we get back." Valentina was stunned for a few seconds, then immediately broke down and wailed. "For her, you're going to abandon me? Lucas, you don't want me anymore, do you? How can you treat me like this?" With red eyes, she pointed at me venomously. "It must be you. Did you threaten Lucas again? You bitch. Lucas stopped loving you long ago. Why do you insist on clinging to him?" I sneered and directly smashed my handbag at her with force. "If you're going to be a mistress, at least have some self-awareness as a mistress. The fact that I don't bother arguing with you is because I find it dirty, not because I'm afraid of you. Get it straight. As long as I want to, I can ruin your reputation at any time." Valentina covered her face and screamed, then made as if she were about to hit me. "You old woman. What are you acting so arrogant for? Once Lucas divorces you, you'll be nothing." Lucas restrained both of her hands and shouted angrily. "Valentina, calm down. This has nothing to do with her." Valentina looked at Lucas in disbelief. "You're still siding with her." The collapsed mountain not far away looked as if it was about to give way again. The unease in my heart grew little by little. The rescue boat was already approaching. I did not want to keep getting entangled with them, so I pushed open the car door and went out with an umbrella. The urgent priority was to move to a safe place first. "Emma, I'll hold your hand." Lucas hurriedly left Valentina behind and chased after me to support me. I did not stop walking and continued forward. The rescue worker spoke into the walkie-talkie for a few moments, then looked at us. "There's only one spot left. Who goes first?" Lucas made a decisive choice and pushed me forward. Let her go first. But just as I was about to board the boat, an exclamation came from behind me. Valentina covered her stomach, her face deathly pale. "Lucas, I feel so awful. Can you send me first?" The strength Lucas was using to lift me loosened for an instant, and I, completely unprepared, knocked against the boat. "Lucas, save our baby. It's only 3 months old." Valentina's voice was shrill and mournful, but I clearly saw her provocative smile disappear before Lucas turned around. At the same time, large chunks of earth rolled down with a rumbling sound. Muddy water surged over, awakening my fear of drowning. My heart gave a heavy thud. Blood flowed down my cheek, terror mixed with pain. The pain made me suck in a cold breath, and my breathing became uneven. "Lucas, let me go first, okay? Valentina is pretending. Believe me, I no longer cared about calculating all the grudges from the past. In my heart, only the instinct to survive remained. Struggle flashed through Lucas's eyes. Then he forcefully pulled me down. "Emma, be good. Go back and stay in the car. Nothing will happen to you." The moment his words fell, he steadily caught Valentina, whose body had gone limp, and lifted her onto the rescue boat. The instant Lucas let go, a torrent rushed over. I was swept into it, powerless to save myself. Dirty water poured into my nasal cavity and respiratory tract, and my vision darkened in waves. Before I lost consciousness, I vaguely heard Lucas's roar. Chapter 11. When I opened my eyes again, I was woken by noise. Luis had Lucas pinned to the ground and was beating him, every punch landing solidly. He was like an out-of-control beast, his entire body filled with a violent aura. Luis. I struggled to speak, only to realize that my throat was so dry it hurt. Lucas stumbled and threw himself toward me, not a trace of color on his face. Emma, you're finally awake. Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? Do you want water? He kept rambling on, looking at me carefully. Luis punched him again and said coldly, "Get out! Sis doesn't want to see you." Lucas clutched his abdomen, his face twisted in pain. Bean-sized beads of cold sweat appeared on his forehead, but he still refused to leave. Emma, listen to me explain. At the time, I never thought there would be an accident. I thought the second boat would arrive soon anyway. I panicked for a moment. Lucas spoke in panic, incoherent. Finally, even he could no longer continue. Lucas fell to his knees, his lips trembling. Emma, I'm sorry. I don't know why things became like this. Clearly I love you. He loved me. But he did not love only me. I looked at him calmly. Lucas. Sign the divorce agreement. Lucas's figure swayed, and even his eyes filled with red veins. After a long while, he spoke with a trembling voice. All right. Chapter 12. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, I held a press conference. I publicly announced Lucas's infidelity. I heard that Valentina was taken by Lucas to forcibly terminate the pregnancy. After losing the child, her mental state became extremely poor, yet she was still dreaming of marrying into a wealthy family. So I specially sent someone to reveal to her the news of our divorce. Lucas would leave with nothing. Sure enough, Valentina could not accept reality and rushed into the venue with a knife. I looked at Valentina, who was pinned to the ground when she was still 1 meter away from me, then turned slightly toward the lawyer. The heavier the sentence, the better. No problem, right? Of course. Make some arrangements in prison. Doesn't she like pretending to be weak? Then let her experience it personally. Don't worry, everything has been arranged. This time, the dirty scandal between Lucas and his mistress was completely confirmed. Public opinion was in an uproar, and Lucas's reputation was ruined. On top of that, I held quite a few of Lucas's business weaknesses in my hands. His family had no choice but to support Luis in taking power. Lucas lost both love and career at the same time, becoming so decadent that he drank all day. Under Luis's instructions, no one went to persuade him, and even less did anyone dare interfere. Crates of strong liquor were arranged to be delivered into Lucas's room. I heard he soon developed stomach cancer and spent all day on the hospital bed muttering my name. But that was all for later. After handling everything, I calmly walked down from the stage, and Luis took my hand. He looked like a resentful little wife, angry but not daring to speak. Sis, that was way too dangerous. What if she had really hurt you? I rubbed the top of his head. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. After the office door closed, Luis held my hand and pressed it against his chest. But I'm still terrified when I think about it. Sis, feel it. My heart is beating so fast. I deliberately looked confused and refused to cooperate. Is it? Why can't I feel anything? Luis laughed softly and pulled open his suit. Our breaths intertwined, and our skin pressed tightly together. The young man's scorching body temperature burned my ears hot. Sis, then feel it again now? I gave it a squeeze and blinked. I still don't seem to feel anything. Luis cupped my face and kissed me, his voice low and hoarse. Then we're still not close enough. Looks like we'll have to be closer than close.